here on Live Now from Fox, and you are taking a live look over Gaza. This image, one of many that we have across the Middle East, and that is a view from Israel. I do want to get to the latest on the war itself, now 10 weeks in. Tal Heinrich is an Israeli government spokesperson joining us now live to talk more about the latest. Tal, thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning, or I should say evening, where you're located.
True. It's the afternoon here. Thank you for having me on, Josh. My pleasure to join you.
Well, first off, I do want to talk about those 3 hostages that were mistakenly killed by IDF troops there. I do know that an investigation is underway at this point. What can you tell me about all of that?
It is a very, very tragic incident. It's the worst scenario that Israelis could have imagined, and it came true. You know, in the Shajaiya neighborhood in Gaza City, our forces misidentified these 3 hostages. Our hearts are with these families right now. It's a very, very difficult time for our nation. Really, there's a heavily charged atmosphere here right now. And they mistakenly thought that they were terrorists and they were shot at. Now, there is an investigation underway. The IDF chief of staff himself is involved because we must draw lessons. This it cannot reoccur. It cannot happen again. Our forces should take into account such a scenario in which some hostages manage to somehow flee their captors, their terrorist captors in the Gaza Strip. That's what happened here. We're still not sure how, but we are investigating. Now, you see this neighborhood of Shajaiya in Gaza City. We called on civilians to evacuate from this area many weeks ago. So by now, the only people who should be around are either terrorists or terrorist supporters or IDF forces. And in this particular neighborhood, we had many encounters with terrorists. Our forces were ambushed just a few days ago. 9 of our best sons were killed there. And the terrorists, I think Fox News also reported that they very often, or almost always, they wore civilian clothing. And they tried to lure in our troops by playing sound in Hebrew many times. Also, sound of children, as if these are hostages, to try to ambush them. So there are many traps. It's a very, very difficult fighting arena. But this, again, should never, ever happen again. And we draw the difficult lessons. And I think one thing to take out of this incident, one thing that your viewers should keep in mind is that our nation, our military, the IDF, we tell the truth, even when it's the most inconvenient, difficult, horrible thing for us to say. We are for transparency, and we are loyal to the truth.
Does what happened to those hostages change anything about the war itself and the operations? We heard from Netanyahu on Saturday where he said it seems as though the war still continues.
Well, the war definitely still continues. We know that the only way by which we saw the release of some of the hostages up until now was because we exerted very, very fierce military pressure against Hamas. So we will continue to pursue every possible avenue to bring to the release of more hostages. We say it that we want to see all of the hostages back in Israel. And of course, the goal of this entire war that Hamas has dragged us into is to eliminate the Hamas terrorist regime in Gaza. Now, these 2 goals, they go hand in hand. You see, they're not contradictory. So we hope that by continuing to exert more military pressure on Hamas, eventually we will be able to create the condition and see the release of more hostages.
And I do want to show this video here that was released by Israel and by the IDF. They posted it on their X page. I want to pull this up for you right now here on Live Now. And you can see it right there on your screen. Essentially, what we know here from the IDF is that weapons were found and essentially 80 terrorists, they say, some who took part in the October 7th massacre, were apprehended here at the Kamal Adwan Hospital in Gaza. And they do say that they were finding weapons and things of that nature in the NICU, in the incubators. What can you tell me about that? Because, I mean, we're talking about weapons of war inside incubators where premature babies are held.
Exactly. As you can see in the video that you're playing now, the soldier was opening the baby incubator inside that hospital and was pulling a bag from inside of it, a bag filled with ammunition. Now, this is a method that Hamas has been using, for years, but we see it on full display right now as our forces are operating, and they're showing the world more and more of the cynical terror infrastructure embedded in and underneath urban areas. Here, you're playing this video again. He's opening up the incubator from the side, from the top, and in every inch of it, you find ammunition. This is what Hamas is doing. They're brutal, gruesome enemies. You saw what they did on October 7th when they burned entire families alive in Israel, when they butchered and they mutilated and they raped Israeli women. And this is their double war crime here. They're not only targeting our population, but as you see, they want to sacrifice the Palestinian civilian population of Gaza for their sick goal of obliterating the state of Israel, the Jewish state. They say it. They chant it, they act on it. We don't need any more proof. What we need is to eliminate them.
We know that U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is going to travel to Israel. We've seen Antony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State, President Biden, as well as several other U.S. officials travel over there. What is expected to happen during that visit by Austin?
So you see, there's no daylight between Jerusalem and Washington in what pertains to the goals of this war. We're on the same page. We all want to see the Hamas terrorist regime, their military wing, and their governance body in Gaza collapsing. They can simply be no longer in Gaza. This terror enclave can never pose a threat to Israel again. We all agree on that. And we all want to see the hostages, all of them, being back home in Israel. Now, as we operate, we also want to avoid civilian casualties to the extent possible, because, in every war, unfortunately, there's collateral damage. And as you just saw and as you just played, Hamas's entire goal is to increase that. And we want to ease the civilian suffering in Gaza. And therefore, we are taking really unprecedented steps here on behalf of the IDF to increase the amount of humanitarian aid and the checks of humanitarian aid trucks coming into the Gaza Strip daily. So we're doing all of this in coordination with our best friends in Washington, the United States, the American people, the sweeping bipartisan support that we've seen so far. So these are the things that we are discussing with the United States right now. And of course, what is the plan for Gaza in the day after this war? This is also, we're discussing various contingency plans. And the most important thing that we say, that once we eliminate Hamas, we don't want to see any resurgence of terrorism. And for that reason, we insist that the state of Israel, for a certain period of time, will keep some overriding security responsibility in Gaza to make sure that anything on the scale and brutality of the October 7th massacre will never, ever occur again.
And we did just learn not too long ago that there was an incident with an arrest in the Netherlands and several in Germany of alleged Hamas members suspecting of plotting attacks on Jews and Jewish institutions across Europe. Of course, as we mentioned, we're talking about Hamas members there. Is there increased concern, not just in Israel, but also, is the government paying close attention to these other situations developing across Europe?
Of course, Josh, and I think it's so important that you just brought this point up, because we said from the very outset of this war that Hamas has dragged us into, that it is so important that Israel will send an unequivocal message against terrorism, because it doesn't stop here in our part of the world. If we don't send out this message that terrorism is a dead end, the year is 2023. Almost 2024, and we're still trying to, contain these elements. That's unbelievable. They won't stop in our part of the world. As you just stated, Germany, the Netherlands, and Denmark, they just arrested terrorists involved with Hamas who were plotting to carry out attacks on European soil. And we said it in the past when we had suicide bombings here in the 1990s. We said that this terrorism will not stop in Israel way before the U.S. and Europe ever imagined that this kind of terrorism, this brutal form will reach their borders. And we don't want to see a repeating pattern, historical pattern here. So this is why it's important not only that Israel send out this message right now, because all bad players, all the terrorists around the world are watching what we're doing now. If we show leniency and if the civilized world tries to tie Israel's hands for terrorist actions, if the civilized world tries to contain itself for their bloodthirsty actions, well, what kind of message would it send? It's an open invitation for more trouble and more bloodshed.
All right. Tal Heinrich there, Israeli government spokesperson. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here and kind of break down the latest information coming out of the war. Is there anything else you want to add before I let you go?
I think I would like to add this. Thank you for the American people, really. The people who have been showing support to the state of Israel because they know how to tell right from wrong and good from evil. And they know that Israel is fighting pure evil here called Hamas. So thank you.
All right. Thank you again for taking the time to join us here. Be safe. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh.